introduce our speaker, Mr. Smith, Leonard Smith III. He began his career at Kodak and now heads LS3 Studios, which is an award-winning full-service multimedia studio in Louisiana. And I'm going to go off script just a bit to say that he's been working for I don't know how many years now on a documentary about the Desire area of the New Orleans metropolitan. And it's really been great to watch him and his passion for that project. It's something that I've watched him do over the last couple of years. And so I'm sure he'll talk about that while he's here. But that's one of the things that's really been great watching him to do. And he also does genealogy, which is also kind of cool. It's something I'm interested in. In addition to that, why he is here today is to talk to you about what it's like to have a multimedia studio, but also to talk about career transitions. So how you may leave an organization or a corporation like Kodak and venture out to do your own thing. And so he's going to talk about transferable skills, which basically means how you gain skills in one setting and you transfer them into another setting. He's going to talk about entrepreneurship, and he's also going to talk about lifelong learning. Okay? So join me in welcoming Mr. Smith.
Okay, any questions? Let me say that was basically my whole career in front of you. Flight of the Bumblebee, anybody? Okay. Reason why I use Flight of the Bumblebee is in public domain, you can use it. And so when you're starting to do film, and we'll talk about that, you have to make sure you have copyrights for stuff that you use. And of course, Flight of the Bumblebee has been around forever, so that's why I use it. But it was only 1 minute and 10 seconds. But I want to actually kind of give you all what it was like in my career. And that's why I say it's based on a true story. This is my graduating class from George Washington Culver High School. Anybody, any Culver people in here? No? Okay, all right. Sorry about that. All right. We had well over close to 600 graduates that year, 1973.
I heard the 75.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, on this stage, I'm probably right in here. Had no clue what I was going to do. I was in a band. I had a bandmate that I had a scholarship, full scholarship to Howard University for architectural engineering. I didn't take that scholarship. I had a scholarship for music. I didn't take that one as well. But one of my bandmates told me, he said, you know, there was a rep came from the Fry Institute of Technology, and he said you can finish college in 3 years. That's all I heard was 3 years. Because I wanted to be an attorney. I said, well, you know what, I would love to go to law school, so if I can go and do 3 years, I'm still young enough to go to law school. So he said, well, we'll go on the buddy system. I said, that's a great idea. So I called him up, the recruiter came to my house, I signed the papers, I called him up, I said, man, I'm ready to go. He said, man, guess what I just did? I said, no, what you did? I just joined the service. I said, you gotta be kidding me, you know. And so I had a cousin who was graduating the same year I was from Culver, and I recruited him to go with me. So I still ended up with a buddy going to DeVry. So we went to DeVry in Dallas. That's my cousin, the short guy right here. Even though we're the same age, that's me, and that's my cousin. Oh, touch screen, I'm impressed. Okay. This was kind of like our first entrance into college, but DeVry was not a college. It was like they rented this space. They didn't have a campus. They rented this space. We stayed in apartments. Of course, I didn't know, when they recruited us, they didn't have all of those details. But when I got there, I was like, wow, this is crazy. So we end up, the first thing came to mind, we had to do a math test. Now, coming from New Orleans, there was a bunch of us from New Orleans. There are people from Texas, New Orleans, Arkansas, but all the folks from New Orleans, we all have a problem with math. For whatever reason, Texas people were just acing everything. And so they put this as a slide rule for all of, anybody knew this was a slide rule? You ever heard of this? Okay. The older group would know. This was our calculator, okay? Well, we had tests that they gave us, and it was like, okay, I think the first test I made a 56. And this was supposed to be, you know, this is an engineering school, so you're supposed to have advanced math. While I was at Culver was a trade school / college prep school. So you had options. So because I was going to be an attorney, my option was I could take Algebra 1 and basic math. Those are the two maths that I had. That's all I had. So when I get to engineering school, I'm like, okay, I may have made the wrong mistake. I should have took the degree, the scholarship to Howard, you know. But I end up going to DeVry, and just so happened there was a Mr. Reid that was on the staff. And Mr. Reid was a different kind of guy. He always liked to have fun in class. But he was supposed to teach us trigonometry. And he gave us a test to see how well we were versed in math. And of course, I think I made a 55-ish or something like that. And so, but I wasn't the only one. The whole group from New Orleans, we were all in the 50s and the 60s. And I am not going to name the schools, but it was all the schools that you know of, private as well as public schools. The guys from Texas all made hundreds, you know. So Mr. Reid said, you know what, I see there's a problem here. I need to teach you all trigonometry, but you all have the basic skills. Now, I'm going to also mention, how many people know that they are a virtual learner? Are there any virtual learners in here? Do you know what a virtual learner is?
Explain it.
Okay, I'm going to talk about it then. I'm a virtual learner, okay. So Mr. Reid said, what I'm going to do, and this is a hero formula. This is what you see in every movie that you watch or every TV program that you see. If you're a film producer, this is what you look for. You look for a story, you look for the hero. There's always something that happens with that hero. There's something that's not that's good for the hero. It could be something bad in his life or whatever. And then he has to move from that and have a great breakthrough. And then eventually he has something to show for he was able to succeed. Well, and this is called a story arc. So when you look at movies, every movie has a hero. So anyway, Mr. Reid was our hero. Mr. Reid said, I'll tell you what, because of the fact that, and his obstacle was the fact that none of us could pass a math test. He said, what I'm going to do, I'm going to teach you all addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and then trigonometry, or algebra and then trigonometry. And what he did, he wrote on the board, 1 + 1 is equal to 2. And he went on from there and brought us all through the math till he got to trigonometry. Well, once he did that, and he did it within 2 weeks, we all had the foundation that we need to learn trigonometry. So by the time I got out of DeVry, I aced every math test there was. And it was only because of Mr. Reid. Now, what if Mr. Reid was not teaching the classes I was there for? And back then at DeVry, if you failed one class, you had to wait until they offer that class again because there wasn't that many classes. So it may be a year. Now, can you imagine if you shut out a year from school, you're not going back. You're going to find a job, and you're going to say, well, forget that. I'm not going to go back. So a lot of guys who did not go to Mr. Reid that I knew from New Orleans dropped out of school. So we all have a hero. You may not know who it is, but you all have a hero in your life that's going to come through the years that your career is trying to start. But anyway, started out with the plastic slide rule. Once you get to the next level, you get a metal slide rule. And you get the leather pouch and you get to carry it. That was like a badge of courage that you carried it. And they used to call us nerds back then, but that's all part of it. This is the first calculator that I owned. This calculator cost $150 back in the 70s. And of course, there's not many functions on it. But we all had to have this by a Texas Instrument. At DeVry, they taught us a lot of different theories. They taught us vacuum tube theory. Anybody know about vacuum tubes? Do you know most of the bands, the great bands that you hear, especially if there's a guitar player, they all still prefer the vacuum tube amplifiers because it's a full enriched sound that they get. So vacuum tube theory, I said, why would I need this other than working on old TVs? Well, it came to play later on in life. From vacuum tubes, they taught us transistors. From transistors, they taught us IC chips. And of course, after IC chips came how to read a circuit board, a schematic. So we had to learn how to read a schematic. This was one of the things that I thought I really excelled in. And it helped me along the way in my career because of the fact that now, when someone is troubleshooting computers and that type of stuff, they want to swap out the whole board. Well, back when I was troubleshooting, we used to replace components. And if that component didn't, Radio Shack was big then. If Radio Shack didn't have that component, which is a transistor here, then you would redesign the circuit out in the field. Engineers don't do that anymore. They just swap out boards. But they taught us that basic, so it gets back to knowing the theory. I used to work at, and I'll show you, Avis Car Rental while I was at DeVry, and also Hager Slacks. And y'all probably, some of these names you may not even heard anymore because Hager's still around in Dallas, but it's pretty regional kind of thing. But Avis was at the airport in Love Field, which is now the Dallas Fort Worth Airport. They moved the airport. But I used to have to walk past Kodak. There was a regional office in Dallas that I had to walk past to get to my apartment every night from work. And I, for one reason, I said, I'm going to work there one day, not knowing that would happen. And it happened here in New Orleans. That's my first business card. Notice the stylish corduroy suit, the big wide tie. This is 1975, okay? What was so great about Kodak at that time, Kodak was the largest filmmaking company in the world. It was one of the largest corporations in the world, and it was actually on the New York Stock Exchange, and it was also one of the Dow companies, Dow Jones companies. Well, they're in bankruptcy now, okay? Thousands of people worked at Kodak. Kodak office had their own bowling alley. They had their own fire department, police department. It was a big campus. It was their training center could be matched by any other company, and they did very well with their training. This is 15 years of cards. I actually had more than that because there's something in between. But this card, notice the address is different. I had set my goals when I got at Kodak. I had read this article in Black Enterprise about this guy who worked for Kodak, black guy. He was a professional baseball player and he was a professional basketball player, and he was the HR director. And I'm like, wow, must be a good place to work. But not thinking the fact that here's a guy, he must have been a superstar because he played professional baseball and basketball. But I set my goals. I said, you know what? I want to be a regional specialist at Kodak. Well, this is when I became a regional specialist at Kodak. But by the time I got to that position, I didn't even bother about getting any new cards or anything. I had the politics. Every step, the politics got more and more involved. I traveled Europe with Kodak. I set up systems for Kodak in Europe, London, Germany, Italy, all on their dime. Got a chance to travel, got a chance to see the world. I traveled to the US, which I don't like flying anymore, but anyway. Circuit boards that I learned how to really troubleshoot at Kodak. These are just some of the equipment that I worked on at Kodak. At one time, there was every product Kodak had, I had worked on in that division. Everything I used to say, everything that had a plug, I worked on at Kodak. They asked me a couple of times to move to Rochester, New York. I don't like cold weather, I don't like snow, so I wanted to stay here. Atlanta was as far north as I wanted to go. But I ended up working in Boston for 5 years. This is a blood analyzer. Kodak had just got into this market, and I ended up working on blood analyzers. This is not their model. This is the one that they sold to Johnson & Johnson, but it's very similar to this. All kinds of robotics. This thing had well over 20 or 30 different computer systems that talk back and forth to each other. Again, remember now, oh, I didn't mention, when I was at DeVry, you had the option to get a 3-year bachelor's degree, or you can get a 2-year associate degree, or you can get a diploma. Guess which one I have?
Diploma?
The diploma.
I thought you said you were going to go back to
Yeah, I did not finish the 3-year program. Not because of the fact that I could not. Again, I started looking at, and I was always one of those who read and kept up with the industry. And because I was reading a lot, I started noticing that the trend was, we need people with hands-on experience. And the monies that I could make as a hand-on engineer as opposed to someone sitting at a desk was pretty much the same. But I got a chance to travel, company car, and all that good stuff. So I decided to go with the 2-year program, and I got out 2 years. I went in 73, got out in 75. So I started at Kodak at age 20. So I was able to, and making good money, you know, and I was single at the time too, so even better, you know. But just to show you that it depends on how you apply yourself, because it might be, you know, as I think back at my career now, I could not have done any better. But if it was me now, I would get the paper, only because they require it now, okay? This is another one of the analyzers similar to what I worked on. And I worked in all the hospitals. I worked in research labs. I worked with Bell Labs. I don't know if you might know them. I actually trained Bell engineers. I worked in, we'll talk about it a little further, but I did leave Kodak. I worked on lasers. I was laser certified. So I put in 15 years with Kodak, but the politics got real bad. I ended up going to Boston. I went to Boston for 5 years. It was a subsidiary of Kodak, and it was only like 12 of us engineers that traveled the world. And so, you know, we could go anywhere from Korea to, you know, you pick where you wanted to go. So I picked Europe because I figured they speak English and I didn't want to deal with another language. But it was an amazing experience. I would go to Milan for a month at a time. I was at the Guardian newspaper for 2 months. I got a chance to bring my wife and daughter to London to see London, all on the company dime. But when I got back, we worked on a project. It was the we actually transmitted color images by way of satellite from London, New York, and California from Seoul, Korea, when the Olympics was in Seoul. And that was big doings back then because it had never been done before. So I was like a head engineer on that project. And so with that project being I guess the stepping stone to a lot of other things Kodak wanted to do, they asked would I move to Boston. Again, I don't do cold weather, so I'm from New Orleans, I didn't want to go to Boston. So I said, well, move me back to New Orleans. They wouldn't move me back. They said, you make more money than the managers in New Orleans. I said, well, I wasn't going to take a cut in pay. I said, well, still move me back, you know. They wouldn't move me back. So I made the decision, after 15 years, I think I'm gonna go into another industry. I went looking in the paper in Atlanta and found this company called Photon Kinetics. But before I get to Photon Kinetics, I worked also biomedical with Kodak. Now this is current. I just pulled this off the board for you all to see. A biomedical engineer, this is the national average, $98,000 a year. Not too shabby. Now, I was doing this in the 80s, and trust me, my salary was more than that, okay? So again, 2 years diploma, technically. Now, in the meantime, I did come back. I came to Delgado. I took night classes at Delgado. I took marketing and management courses here. I ended up going to La Ola. Delgado, La Ola took all of Delgado credits that I had, and I ended up at La Ola. I left there as a advanced sophomore, I guess they would say. They didn't take my credits from DeVry because they say it was not accredited at the time. Now, I'm saying to myself, I've done all of this, but you're still telling me my credits are not accredited. But again, that's the system. So I came to Delgado, went to La Ola, and I ended up at Tulane. And I'll tell you all about that shortly. But I just want to get a feel for what it's like if you put yourself in the right place. And again, if it wasn't for Mr. Reid, I wouldn't have made that. You know, I probably, who knows what I would be doing, you know. Normally I work on a Mac, so I'm really, trust me, I'm struggling with this PC, but anyway. This is me at work. This is how I dress going to work, you know. This was the board of communication, a beeper. There was no cell phones. Me troubleshooting. I got a chance to see the world with Kodak. And this is about the communication system we did by satellite. So when I left Kodak, I decided to go, I wanted to stay high tech. So I ended up working in fiber optics. Anybody familiar with, if you got good internet, you probably got fiber optics, okay? This was supposed to be the rave of the future. This company was called Photon Kinetics, which was in Beaverton, Oregon. So here I am now going to Oregon. Okay, I'm going to Oregon, and I worked there for 2 years. Small company that was, the president was one of the former presidents of Microsoft. And their whole goal was to be bought and sold, and that's what happened. So they asked me, well, do you want to move? By this time I moved back to New Orleans. They asked me if I wanted to move back to Atlanta. I said, nope, I will stay right here and I'll find a job. So I found a job at Tulane University. Electron microscopes. This is where my vacuum tube theory that I learned at DeVry paid off, because they had an old Siemens microscope that ran with vacuum tubes. They had a whole closet full of power supplies that was all vacuum tubes. So again, my theory, as you can see, you kind of build up on what you already know. And this is kind of images. This is actually pollen. That's an image of pollen that you would see in this electron microscope. 6 years at Tulane, went to school there, got to take classes that I wanted to take. I was always looking into taking the tech classes that I wanted to take. So I ended up at ADP. Anybody heard of ADP before? Yeah. Automatic data processing, the world's largest payroll company. I've always, I guess, was attracted to the large companies. I worked with employees from one to the largest corporations in the world. And what I did there, I taught myself how to program, and I started programming data conversion for them. And came up with some processes that they still use today. I've been going there since 2010. But this job gave me a chance to see the inside of who makes what in corporate America, who makes what in the mom and pop. You know what I found out? The entrepreneurs make a lot of good money. A lot of good money. And that's why I decided that's what I wanted to do. Even though when you looked at these big corporations, when they had a bonus check, some of these guys' bonus checks were $2-3 million for 1 quarter. Yeah, there's a lot of money out there. 2008, I was the unsung hero at ADP. 2 years later, I got laid off. So what does that tell you? I had all these awards from ADP. When I hired on, they told me you're overqualified for the job. But after becoming the unsung hero, they told me, oh, you're not a good fit. We moved in a different direction. They wanted more people who were using their software before they got there, which I had never done before. So just to let you know, entrepreneurship really pays off. This is my journey to LS3 Studios. The Bride in 73, Ava 73, Hager Slacks, I used to work at. And I mentioned here, learn from your life experiences. Kodak, and the company I worked with, Kodak, which was a subsidiary, was called Iconic. 15 years total with Kodak. 2 years at Photon Kinetics, 6 years at Tulane, and 12 at ADP. And I've had LS3 Studios for 14 years now. This is the LS3, this is my logo. It's a tree that I shot a picture of that's in Iberville Parish. Now that I live in Lafayette, every time I pass this tree, I think of home, so I made it my logo, and that's why you'll see it on my documentaries. The reason why I started LS3 Studios is to tell the story of the underdog. You know, everybody knows who won the Super Bowl, everybody knows who did this, but nobody knows who reigned second, you know? And so, even in history, because I love genealogy, you always hear about the stories of people who had the plantations, but what about the slaves? They had stories as well. So with that, this is an old African proverb. Until a lion has his historian, the hunter will always be the hero. And so that's the basis of LS3 Studios. So the stories I tell in LS3 Studios are of people who may not have ever made it to the front page of the paper. My music teacher, Ms. Bush at Carver, just happened to pick up the paper and saw there was going to be a reception in her honor. A friend of mine now, Al Kennedy, wrote a book about her life story. I didn't know that she was a child prodigy when we were in high school. I studied under her for 4 years, didn't know that. So I decided to tell her story. We won 3 major awards for that story. Okay.
What's the Telly Awards?
Telly is let's see, the competition is people like Oprah,
Okay.
the different TV stations. It's a nationwide, it's countrywide because there's other countries involved. But it's not the Emmy, but it's in that same group. The same people make that statue, make theirs as well. But it's competition and all of them actually are competitions with, but Telly's is the biggest one out of, once you get past the Oscars and that type of stuff. So I did one on Miss Bush, St. Joan of Arc Church Uptown. They had a 100th anniversary. We won 2 Telly Awards for our presentation for them. And this is a lady out of New York who found me, and it was her family story that I did, and we won an Ava and a Telly Award. I do workshops. I spoke at the Whitney Plantation. I even had a tape at Genealogy Roadshow, and I actually co-produced a TV show in Baton Rouge on genealogy. All this since I started my own business. Okay, and these are some of the awards from LS3, and the story to be continued. And that's it.
That's wonderful.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to transition into question and answer. So I'm going to start with 3 questions that I have, and then we'll open it up to you all to ask questions, okay?